The last speaker is going to talk about activism through community. Roland Harwood comes from the UK. He will join us from London, and well, he's a great connector of people and ideas. He calls himself, and this is very interesting, he calls himself a failed astronaut and a failed MP. The first time ever I hear anyone introduce oneself like that. I'm sure those two have nothing in common, but this is how how he introduces himself. A few facts. There's a ton of facts about Roland if you want to read everything about him. I just want to mention, besides the astronaut and MP thing, that he is the founder of Liminal, a collective intelligence community focused on addressing complex and collaborative challenges. And he works with United Nations Development Programme. He works with Nesta. He works with Wellcome Trust. You name it. He leads IOVIA's European operations, and this brings him to clients like Lego, IKEA, Unilever, etc. I think this is all important, but I think it's also important that he has worked with hundreds of startups. I think this is the future in many ways. The stage is now all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Päivi. Thank you so much, Henrik. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today. So thank you. Cześć Gdynia. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today, but I'm honored to have the last word. And I'm hoping to leave you building on some of what Päivi and Henrik said, with some inspiration, but also some ideas for how you can convert some of what you've learned and heard over the last 2 days into action, into change in your work and in your life. So yeah, the theme of my talk, as Päivi shared, is activism through community. And I want to talk about activism for better places and cities and rural locations as well. I want to talk about activism for better business and organizations, and ultimately activism for a better world and society through building communities. And this photo on the screen here now is, I took this last October, which is less than a year ago, but it seems like a lifetime ago with everything that's happened since then. And you may recognize it as the Extinction Rebellion climate emergency protests that have been happening over the last few years. And I think this is a really fascinating example of performance art meets sort of science and politics. So these people dressed in red robes and white faces, crossing Waterloo Bridge, one of the main bridges across the Thames River here in London. Impossible to ignore as you're walking past, as I was that day, but also a bit confusing to understand quite how to engage and what to do about it. But I think that confusion is deliberate. I think there's something fascinating about the kind of the tension, the creative tension that sets up, which is very, very powerful. So I want to build on that and draw inspiration from that in the stories that I share today, which, if I'm honest with you, when I look at the news and social media, it's easy to despair that our politics is beyond parody, our economy is beyond repair, and our society is perhaps beyond salvage. And yet I prefer to choose hope and see opportunity in the spaces in between people, places, and organizations, the liminal spaces, the sort of gray areas, the boundaries, the thresholds, the transitions. This term, this concept of liminality is one that I find deeply fascinating and pervades all of my work in recent years, where I've been seeking to be part of and host conversations, build new relationships with unlikely communities, and hopefully redesign new systems, structures in between people and places and organizations. So I urge you to choose hope and find the kind of liminal spaces in between. I think that's where true activism and creativity occurs. So I'm going to talk through a number of examples in a moment, but just I am inspired by the words of Kurt Vonnegut, the American writer, who said, "Out on the edge, you can see all kinds of things that you can't see from the center. So push to the edges of your places and organizations and institutions. You'll see further. This is where change happens. This is where innovation occurs." And yet we often ignore these kind of forgotten places, but this is where I think we should push to. This is where true change happens. I am a very proud geek and a scientist and mathematician by background, so just a tiny bit of science before I talk through some examples. So we all often think linearly about growth and about communities and about change, but this is a paradox and a mistake in many ways. Change happens exponentially through communities growing. So if I can just describe briefly what this chart is supposed to illustrate. So if you imagine the little white dots here on the chart are people, and the red lines are connections between people that form pairs. If you have just three people, like myself, Henrik, and Päivi just a few moments ago, there are just three different kind of combinations that you can form between the three of us. But as that community grows to 10 people, the number of combinations grows to 45. And with 30 people, it gets to hundreds, 435 to be precise. And Henrik shared some of the numbers about today and yesterday's event, 700 to 2,000 people. The number of connections there are almost infinite. And so the connectivity grows exponentially, or actually for the mathematicians amongst you, it's a geometric progression, but that is not important here. What is important is what this connectivity allows is at the most trivial level, when you have 30 people in a room, the chances are that two people will share a birthday because of all these different connections. Two people will have something very trivial in common, like sharing a birthday. This is counterintuitive to most people. But more importantly than that, they may have some profound shared interest or capabilities that is often hard to kind of see or visualize before we get to know each other. But increasingly through the tools of Zoom and YouTube and social network analysis and all the rest of it, it's possible to make those connections, see those connections, and kind of build new communities and infrastructure that builds upon this connectivity that pervades our world today. So I want to sort of take that idea and encourage you beyond today and this session to find other people, connect where you have something in common with them, where you have similarities, but benefit from your diversity and cognitive diversity and all forms of difference. That's where activism and creativity and change occurs. So without any further ado, let me dive into 4 quick examples that illustrate some of the points I'm trying to make. And these are all things that I've worked on personally, that I'm involved with, and I'll just share with you my own reflections on why I think these are interesting examples of activism through community. They're all extremely different. This first one is called Participatory Cities. You can see the link at the bottom of the screen there. And this is an incredibly inspiring example of regenerating and redeveloping one of the poorest boroughs in Britain currently, but it's soon being exported internationally as well, through a highly participatory ground up approach. What the fantastic team at Participatory Cities have done over the last 2.5 years is take over derelict shop units across the borough of Barking and Dagenham in East London, which is the poorest borough in London and the poorest kind of area of London and one of the poorest areas in the UK. And they've turned those units into places where the community can meet, places where the community can learn new skills, whether it's making clothes or cooking or 3D printing, and places, most importantly, where the community can connect and build social cohesion between. This is a very diverse part of London where there has been historically, well, until very recently, quite a lot of challenges between different groups of people. And so Participatory Cities is one model that is seeking to change this through building social cohesion and measuring over a 5-year period the economic impact, the social impact that has on people's lives and on the borough and on people's educational opportunities and employment opportunities as well. It's incredibly practical. The vast majority of the team here building this are running hundreds of events and meetups. People and the feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. I think it's a really inspiring model. I'm a trustee of the organization. I urge you to take a look at it. If you're interested in the work that they're doing, please do get in touch, and I would love to talk to any of you about that and see how some of those ideas may be translated to Gdynia or wherever you are in the world. So take a look at that. It's really a wonderful example of bottom-up activism through building community across a place and across a city. The second example is incredibly different, but in my mind is also applying some of these same principles and values in the manifesto that Päivi and Henrik also talked about. So this comes from Lego, who nearly 10 years ago, I had the privilege of working with them on trying to harness the creativity of their fans and their customers. And of course, a brand like Lego, you might expect, gets lots and lots of ideas sent to them, and it's very, very hard for them to respond to them all, let alone do them. So we came up with an idea. Initially, it was just for employees. It was internally focused, but then it went external. And it's a community now of 1 million people called Lego Ideas. The website is in the bottom left-hand corner there. And this community now of over 1 million people come up with ideas for new Lego products. 10,000 people have to support those ideas. And if they do, then it goes into a review process. And Lego produces, I think, 4 new products a year. And almost every single one of those products sells out after they've launched them. And they share 1% of the revenue, the money from those new products with the person who created them. So here are just 2 examples on the screen. Female scientists embodied in Lego form on the left-hand side here. Famous female scientists. And on the right-hand side, Minecraft brought to life in physical form. So these are 2 products that Lego wouldn't have dreamt of creating, but these were fans of the product who created this idea and built a community around them. And Lego have created this process to launch new products this way. But more than just product innovation, as helpful and valuable as that is, this community gives phenomenal insight and data into what Lego customers and fans really, really care about. So you may have seen in recent years Lego responding to the advertising ban on Facebook recently, the activity happening around Black Lives Matter, and Lego's response there was hailed as particularly progressive. Responses around kind of climate change and partnerships with different media outlets and oil companies, etc. A lot of this commercial activism, if that isn't a contradiction, comes from some of the conversations and the values that are grounded into the brand and the company through this community and other communities. This isn't the only one, of course, but it's one of the biggest ones. And I think there's something really powerful about the combination of social and commercial objectives to create value and to make the world a better place, frankly. And I think large companies are in many ways more powerful than any governments or any groups or any charities, and increasingly need to play a more active role in shaping and creating the world we want to live in. And I think Lego is a good example of a company that is not doing everything right, but certainly doing experimenting around this idea of activism through community, and I think they're to be commended. This is a project, there's a logo on the right-hand side of the company I work with called IOVIA, who are a fascinating Canadian technology company who helped to grow this community and provide the technology infrastructure behind it, and many other consumer-facing brands like IKEA and Unilever as well. A completely different example now comes from another community that I'm part of called Liminal, which I'll say a bit more about at the end. So this is a new project that launched only yesterday called Scaling Out for Impact. And this is around trying to tackle global inequality in between the UK, the United Kingdom, where I am right now, and South Africa, which by some metrics, by many metrics, is the most unequal society in the world. And there are a whole host of reasons for that. But what we're trying to do through this project is bring together innovators and entrepreneurs, at the moment just between the United Kingdom and South Africa, but our aspiration and our ambition is to grow this globally in due course as well. It is funded by UK and South African government, and we're bringing these entrepreneurs together to form new joint ventures around the theme of circular economy and manufacturing, around the future of healthcare, in particular the post-COVID response, which is currently having a devastating effect, especially on rural and township communities within South Africa. And lastly, around kind of financial resilience and some of the sort of economic underpinnings of rural and township communities. It's an incredibly difficult project, but it's the sort of hard problem that I think we collectively need to be looking at and being creative around in terms of connecting up, in this case, different places, entrepreneurs from different places, to tackle these deeply entrenched kind of hard problems, to build a more equal and equitable society. If you're interested in any of this, there's more information on the URL at the bottom of the page. Do take a look and get in touch if you're interested to find out more. The last example I'm going to refer to is a really joyful piece of work I've had the privilege to be involved with in the last 5 years or more, which we've recently published on the website in the top left-hand corner of the screen here. And this is all about helping cities be activists to become net zero and carbon neutral by 2030, 2035. Different cities have different kind of targets. And it's really a huge mountain to climb, which on this chart, you can see some of the key milestones or steps up the mountain that cities and places and urban areas need to progress through in order to achieve that target. But here we're trying to capture learning and share learning. At the moment, this was a piece of work done in 6 British cities, but there's so much work happening around the world, and I genuinely hope that the current COVID crisis is a catalyst for accelerating towards a carbon neutral future that we all need and want. And there are so many opportunities to do that. And we need to take those before they slip away. And so if you're interested in this kind of work, or you're inspired to be part of it, then do take a look at some of the work we've published here recently, and do get in touch. And I'd love to talk to you about any of that, because this is one of the kind of guiding forces of the likes of Extinction Rebellion, and a lot of the work that I have been involved with in recent years. And I hope it's something that some of you may wish to participate in as well. So those are just 4 examples of innovation and activism that has emerged through community. But I love this quote from a famous academic, I think based in the UK, in the United States, called Verna Ali, who talks about innovation and activism isn't something that can be manufactured following a 3-stage or a 5-stage process. It is a byproduct of engaged communities and networks of people who come together for a reason because they feel passionate around a topic. And as a result of those conversations and those interactions, innovation and change and activism is very much a byproduct. So focus on building community, focus on engaging in a high quality, high touch, high trust way. One of the themes that will be added to the manifesto, as Henrik shared. And if you do that, then innovation and activism and change will occur as a byproduct of that. Don't do it the other way around. Don't try and sort of manufacture novelty for the sake of it. That seldom works. That seldom sticks. So focus on the community and the community engagement. So just one little kind of playful example, which if you want to, you can just try this wherever you are. If you want to, so what I'd invite you to do is just to copy and complete the sketch of the bicycle that you see on the screen before you now. And I'll explain just whilst you perhaps try that. Fill in the blanks and fill in what you feel is missing. And I'll explain just briefly why I'm doing this and why this is important. So there's an amazing piece of work done in the University of Liverpool here in the UK by a cognitive psychologist called Rebecca Lawson around something called the knowledge illusion. The knowledge illusion. So basically what she shows in her work and illustrates through exercises like this one is that most of us don't distinguish between knowledge and ideas that we have inside our heads and knowledge and ideas that we know we have access to through our networks, through our relationships, through the internet, of course, as well. And so, for instance, when it comes to something like an everyday object like a bicycle, most people assume too much in terms of the knowledge they have about how a bicycle works, even if they ride a bicycle every day. So when you ask people to copy and complete the sketch, I'm curious to see your sketches if you're willing to share them on the Gdynia Mighty Networks platform after my talk. But I'll just show you, here are some examples of other sketches from other people when we ask them to do this exercise. And if you notice, these are all impossible bicycles. None of these would actually function as a bicycle. In the top right-hand corner, you have pedals floating in midair, not connected to anything, that would have no way of actually turning the wheels. In all four cases, you have the chain connected from the front wheel to the back wheel, which also wouldn't work. The pedals are connected to the front wheel in both the top left and bottom right cases. And people, myself included, often get confused with how the frame works. And by doing this exercise, the purpose of this isn't to make people feel silly. It's just to make people recognize that actually we think we know how a bicycle works, and yet many of us struggle to even draw how a bicycle looks, let alone explain how it operates. For most people, it's not important information. Our brain only holds between 1 and 40 gigabytes of information, depending on the science that you believe. That's a small amount of information. We outsource everything else to everything else that isn't vital and critical, and yet we fail to distinguish between the knowledge that we truly hold and the knowledge that is held by other people. And so the lesson I take from this exercise is to truly try to be humble, to acknowledge what we don't know, to say what, to show our uncertainty and our lack of knowledge as a position of strength rather than a position of weakness, and truly to pay attention to others. Every single person you will ever meet can teach you something that you don't already know. So be humble in terms of your engagement with other people. Strive to learn from them. Breathe the air together when we're allowed to do that. And we can grow together and we can learn from each other. And I think this is a huge shift that we need to retrain our brains and ultimately our communities to do this, because this is often a misapprehension for most people. So I want to finish by just inviting you to take a look at a new community that I've had the privilege of being part of and helping to set up over the last year. This is a slightly old slide. It needs updating. There are many more faces now that we would add to this slide, but it's a community called Liminal. You can have a look at some of the people involved at the link there in the middle of the screen. And we describe ourselves as a collective intelligence community to build a more sustainable and equitable world. We like to tackle hard problems that fall between the cracks between different people, places, and institutions. And we try and harness our kind of collective intelligence of our community, but also combining sort of data and technology, as well as human ingenuity, creativity, and design. If this is of interest to you, please take a look and get in touch. We'd love to talk to you about that. And we really created this because I am now 46 years old, and I've sort of been waiting for some community like this to come for all of my life, and I haven't quite found it. And so I decided 2 years ago, for lots of reasons I don't have time to go into now, to sort of find a fellow community of people that would want to do this together and with me. And so in the words of June Jordan, who's a famous New York-based feminist writer, she talks about the fact that we are the ones that we have been waiting for. So let's not wait for anybody else to solve our problems. Let's not wait for others to sort it out for us. Let's sort it out for ourselves. Let's organize, let's coordinate, and let's be the change and create the change that we want to see. This is what the Liminal community is striving to do, and there are many, many other like-minded communities out there doing similar things, and I think that's a wonderful thing, and I want us to work together. So everything that we do at Liminal is underpinned by this idea of collective intelligence, which, as I just said briefly a moment ago, is about combining machine intelligence and human creativity. We were privileged to work last year with the United Nations and a foundation and a charity called Nesta on a collective intelligence design playbook. You can see some screenshots from some of the pages here. It's a nearly 200-page document. You can download it for free if you follow the link on the bottom left-hand corner there on the screen. And this is trying to make available the methods, the tools, as well as a whole bunch of case studies and frameworks as well, for how to kind of harness collective intelligence and create activism through community. So this may be a useful resource for some people. I certainly hope that it is, and it's the foundation for much of the work that I've been involved with over the last few years, over the last few decades, in fact. And it's something I'm very proud of having played a part of. So do take a look at that if you're looking for different methods and different tools to harness activism through your communities that you're a part of. So I guess my closing words, just to build on some of the things I've said and some of the things that Päivi and Henrik kind of started off with and over the last few days, is I urge you, in the words of Simone Weil, to be generous, and paying attention to others is the rarest and purest form of generosity. We are all so distracted. We live in an attention economy where it's so easy to be distracted by Twitter or Facebook or whatever it might be. And yet to truly pay attention to another human being and to sort of understand and go deep in terms of their soul and where they're coming from, and to learn from them without sort of judgment necessarily, even if they're sharing ideas with which we don't naturally have an affinity, is so important, and until recently I would say has been very lacking, but I think that is changing, and I take hope from that. And so I would like to thank you for paying attention to the words that I've been sharing over the last few minutes. It's a real privilege to be in this position to close the Gdynia Design Days with a few of my stories. And so be generous, pay attention, and think about whom specifically you would like to connect with right now, and why specifically you would like to connect with them. The famous experiment in the 1960s by Stanley Milgram showed that we are just 6 degrees separated from anyone else on the planet. But actually, more recently, some research shows that those 6 degrees of separation are more like 3 or 4. It's about 3.5, in fact, according to some research done by Facebook a few years ago. So what this means is we're literally 1 or 2 conversations away from literally anything and everything, anyone and everyone. And so the challenge now is not so much finding those people. It is simply a question of knowing what the problems that we want to solve, the resources and what we're able to give to those, and then reach out. Don't be shy. I've been amazed over the last 2 or 3 years by reaching out to people who I thought were far too busy or far too important to talk to me. And I think if you approach people in the right way with a spirit of generosity and a spirit of interest and attention and trust, people want to help other people. And so please help other people if they approach you. Please approach me if I can be helpful to you in any way. But be specific about who you want to get to and why you want to get to them, and reach out today. I urge you to do it. It's not as hard as it sounds and not as hard as it looks. And if there's anybody you would like to get to that I might be able to introduce you to, that is one way in which I could possibly help. So thank you very much for listening to what I've had to share. There are a few links here on the final slide to some of the organizations that I'm affiliated with and some of the examples that I've shared with you on this talk. It's been a real privilege to be able to share my stories and to sum up some of the thoughts around activism through community. I'm excited to hear what you do next, and I wish you well. So please keep on connecting people and ideas. If you do, you never know what might happen. So thank you and goodbye.